Good evening and welcome to New York City Atheists Live on Tape, brought to you by New York City Atheists. I'm your host, Dennis Horvitz, the David Letterman of the Hopelessly Damned. We are taping tonight's show from one of our Sunday brunches, and if you would like more information about our Sunday brunches or any other event happening at New York City Atheists, just go to our website, where you can also, I guess you can download a copy of our newsletter. Ken, do you realize that it has been months, if not years, since I've actually plugged the newsletter? So I want to make up for lost time. Please see our newsletter.
The check is in the mail.
The check is, thank you very much. And the Albanian as well. But I'm okay, there's no level to which I will not sink, ladies and gentlemen, obviously. Today our guest, or tonight for you, our guest is Dr. John A. Henderson, who is going to discuss his latest book. Very good show and tell, by the way. Visual. Judging God. Okay. And Dr. Henderson is a retired United States Air Force flight surgeon, and I'll just give you a little bit of background. After graduating with honors from the University of Illinois College in Medicine in 1945, he interned at the Research and Educational Hospitals in Chicago, Illinois. His surgical residency was at the Scott and White Clinic in Temple, Texas. During his Air Force career, he was a flight surgeon and general surgeon serving in England, Spain, and Japan. In the United States, he was stationed at various bases from New York to California. Following his retirement from the Air Force in 1972, Dr. Henderson practiced general surgery in Asheville, North Carolina, where he still is with his wife, Ruth. After closing his own office in 1994, he assisted other surgeons until 2006, and presently he is Buncombe County Medical Examiner. Maybe on another show we'll have him discuss what it's like to be a medical examiner. In addition to his book, Judging God, Dr. Henderson is the author of two others, God.com, A Deity for the New Millennium, Fear, Faith, Fact, and Fear, Faith, Fact, Fantasy. I'm going to try to say that 3 times backwards, fast. Fortunately, not tonight for you, so don't worry about it. All of his books discuss some of the harmful effects of religion and the illogical belief in an all-knowing, all-powerful, supernatural being, and he has been a guest on Atheist Viewpoint. In fact, yesterday, before we taped this show, he was my guest on that show, which I'm sure you're all watching on MNN. In any case, after many phone calls and emails and negotiations, which I think went on for about a year, when I come to think about it now, because it was right we started discussing this, the possibility of being on the show when he was on Atheist Viewpoint last year. In any case, we are delighted to welcome to New York City Atheists Live on Tape, Dr. John Henderson. So, what we'll do is Dr. Henderson will give us a presentation, and then afterwards we'll open up to a Q&A. And by the way, he's got some books with him, and if you want any more information about his books, you can go to www.johnhenderson-god.com, or you can contact us at New York City Atheists. Dr. Henderson.
Thank you. And so I'm sure that our 3 children are agnostics and probably not willing to use that term that atheist term. Now, some of you have read about Sam Harris, and he doesn't like the atheist term, while Hitchens and Dawkins like it very much. I think the important thing is that we who are non-believers, from all practical purposes, you have to decide where you're going to fight your wars. I don't go over to our assisted living, talk to some poor little old white-headed lady who's going to be with Jesus. Yeah, I don't say anything. I think it's too bad, and I think she doesn't realize the burdens that she has had, though most of the people think that, well, it's the other guy's God that's bad. My God's a good God, but the other guys, the other 9,000 different gods, they're the ones that are bad. So I want to mention just a couple of chapters that I'll close with here in the last book. One is the use of the word intelligent design. Now, I think we ought to drop that word. Now, I would go along with intelligent design if the glass were half full. But the glass isn't even half full. I mean, as I sit here, I'm wearing trifocals. One of the batteries in my hearing aid went out, so I've only got one hearing aid. My back hurts me. My prostate's enlarged. Now, how in the world, I don't know, a moron or an idiot that was all-powerful and all-knowing that wouldn't do a better job of intelligent design. Now, I have spent all of my life around hospitals, and hospitals are filled with people who are unintelligently designed. In fact, it got to the point where now, where something like Katrina comes along, or the cyclone in Burma comes along, kills 100,000 people, you notice God is nowhere to be seen. So they've taken what obviously has to be a result, if there is an all-knowing, all-powerful God, there has to be his cause. In fact, I had occasion to look up a comment in which I've studied more about the Bible the last 5 years writing these books and trying to make sure whether I was right or not than I ever read before, because I realized at a very early age that the Bible not only was bad history, but it was bad literature, and in my opinion, it is immoral. The only halfway decent morality of the Bible that I can figure out is the Golden Rule. And the Christian Golden Rule can be improved upon, because as you know, the Christian Golden Rule is don't do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That really doesn't make sense when you really evaluate it, because I might have you do something for me that I wouldn't do for you, but that you're supposed to go ahead and do it. But the Buddhist Golden Rule is better. Don't do unto others what you would not have them do unto you. Now that really makes a little more sense to me philosophically than the Christian Golden Rule. But getting back to the concept of morality and the Golden Rule, that rule predates all religion. That rule has been in all societies. And that rule is necessary for people to get along. So I think if you look at the design of the universe and see what's going on, you look at the design of the animal kingdom, and you see, somebody has said there are more species of animals that have become extinct than are now present in the universe. So that means that every one of them was poorly designed. They could not adapt to their environment. So far, humans have been able to adapt. So I think we should, anybody that talks about intelligent design, I say, oh, wait a minute. It isn't even halfway full. I don't know anybody that wouldn't do a better job of designing the universe than we have now. It is unintelligently designed if there is an intelligence behind it, which I don't believe it is. Now, I would like to also mention a chapter called, in that last book, called The Big Scam. In my opinion, organized religion is the biggest scam that's ever been perpetrated on the human race. And I don't really mind scams, you know. I figure, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I mean, we learn from being scammed. We learn from being frauded. But some people, especially if they're told over and over again of something that is, they're selling tickets to heaven. That's all they're selling. If you don't believe in life after death, and I am amazed at how many people, when you start talking about religion, when you start down to the bottom line, do you believe in life after death? it's not just 3 to 4% of people who are out of the closet atheists. I would say it's up to 20 or 25% of the people who really do not believe in life after death. I thought we should do with beliefs like we do in medicine. We try to have some way to measure pain. So what we tell people in their trying to describe the pain that they're having. Now 0 is no pain. 10 is absolute terrible pain, like having a childbirth or passing a kidney stone. Now, where is your pain in this spectrum? And people will say, well, I'm a 7 or 8, or I'm only a 3 or 4, or whatever it is that, and they're describing their pain. Well, I thought we should do the same thing with beliefs. And what I would like to do, and I may, if I can get a general audience, I may do this. I would like to tell those people, the subject is life after death. I want to know what you think of life after death. If you're a 0, you're like me, and you know there is no life after death. You're a 0. If you're like the fundamentalist Christian and you know there is life after death, then that's a 10. And I will bet you that the majority of people will fall in the lower level. There may be some 2. There'll be a lot of 2s and 3s. There will be a lot of people who basically say, I do not believe in life after death. So why do you need a God if you don't believe in life after death? Because it's obvious that God isn't helping you pay for your meals today. God isn't helping you with the acute appendix. He's not helping the 100,000 people that are starving in Burma now. So if he isn't going to help them, why would he think about helping you? And if we're not going to be judged at the end of our life, then there's no need for God. And in fact, in my opinion, the best thing you can say about God, by the definition that I've made, the best thing you can say about God is that it doesn't exist. Because if you say that God exists, you've got to account. God has to account for all that's going on in the world today. In fact, I've used the example of at the beginning, say the world was, according to Genesis, was created in 6 days. Well, once you start talking to religious people, they say, well, 6 days, a day could be a month, or a day could be 10 years, or a day could be 1,000 years. And I said, well, why talk about 6 days? If it could be anything, that's garbage. And so they make excuses all of the time for what they believe. Now, I do think that not only is it the biggest scam, but I think it ruins people's lives. And I think people are happier if they do not have such a supernatural being. But I think we have to be practical. I never admitted that I was an atheist, even though I knew I was one all my life. I would be operating on a patient and a little white-headed old lady sitting there going to have surgery done in the next 15 or 20 minutes, and she looks up at me and says, oh, Dr. Henderson, I'm so glad you're a Christian. And I would say, well, it's important that you have confidence in your surgeon. Or I've had people that would say, well, would you pray with me? And I would say, well, why don't we just hold hands and we'll each have a silent prayer, if that gives them comfort. My feeling, though, is that the comfort of religion doesn't work nearly as well as heroin and cocaine. But we don't normally recommend that for most people. But I think you have to be realistic. You have to decide where you're going to fight your wars. Now I'm out of the closet. Jane has got me out of the closet. So I'm willing to become an out of the closet atheist. But I don't think everybody can do that. And I've had some discussions with Ellen Johnson in my first book. I tell people they have to be careful about their views. She didn't like it. Of course, she's making her living being an atheist, and that is one thing. You probably aren't making your living being an atheist, and you've got to go home to your families who may still hang on to their childhood religious beliefs, and you may end up in church that Sunday, and I think that's perfectly legitimate. And I must admit, I got a great big yellow streak up my back. I'm one of the medical examiners for Buncombe County, and we get involved in investigating the deaths of everybody in Asheville and Buncombe County. And I'm frequently called to testify. And when I testify, there isn't any if, buts, or ands, like you mentioned yesterday, about having a choice. They say, put your left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand, and promise and swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, the whole truth, so help you God. This to an atheist. And I say, I do. And then I got to thinking about it at home. I said, well, you're just a big coward, for crying out loud. Why don't you tell them? And that second time it came up, did the same thing. And I keep telling myself, well, I'm not really a coward. I just don't think this is the time to discuss religion. Now, I respect certain people, and I respect Christopher Hitchens, and I respect Dawkins for getting out of the closet. And I even respect Sam Harris when he says we probably shouldn't call ourselves atheists. Well, I won't go that far, because we need atheists out in front to break the ground for common agnostic people, like our three children. They're never going to admit that they're atheists. They're not going to join organizations, but they are, and I think they're happy in their situation. So I would ask, as a final remark, I would ask those of you, whether you're out of the closet or not, or whether you're out of the closet once in a while, but not all the time, as I am, when you hear something from religion that is absolutely harmful, speak up. You don't have to give your views, but you have to speak up. Now, I've gotten a reputation in Asheville for writing a lot of letters, because I've been answering, and there's a section in the letters to the editor. There's a section where you can give an instant letter on a letter, discussing a letter that was in the day before, and it has to be under 100 words, has to be short, and you can give an instant letter. Now, I do not respond to Billy Graham's crap. He has a daily program in there. I do not respond to anything that's on the religion page. But anytime anyone writes a letter to the editor about religion that I disagree with completely, I do respond to it. And I have noted that because of that, there are fewer and fewer letters pushing religion in the letters to the editor. So I'm sure that's an effective way to deal with thoughts such as this. So with that in mind, I would say speak up when you see the harmful effects of religion, and pick your wars. Now, I'd like to throw the program open to comments and questions, and I have an answer for everything. So you may not be right.
I thought I was the only one. Thank you, Dr. Henderson.
Thank you.
Actually, before we throw this open, when we did Atheist Viewpoint yesterday, and we were going over some of the topics you brought up in the table of contents, I kind of took two chapters and mushed them together. Maybe you just give a little comment. There's two chapters in the book. One is which is called Saint Lucifer, and immediately followed by The Devil Gets a Bum Rap. So could you kind of give us a combination answer description? Yeah.
Well, I'd like to point out that I'm not a biblical scholar. I realized in the 3rd grade that this was a bunch of crap, and I never read it. I was interested in other things, how to make a living and some other things. And I would imagine that there probably, all of you in this audience know more about the Bible than I do. But I must admit that I've learned as I've written. And as I go back to simple logic, and you go back to the idea of Genesis, that this God created the whole earth and all the people in it. And then he created his angels. And then he created, one of his angels was Saint Lucifer. He should have known that Lucifer was going to turn out to be a bad guy. He's all-knowing. So what does he do? Instead of zapping him and getting rid of him, he allowed him to go out and prey on the human beings. Now that's illogical. And the whole concept of that definition of God is illogical. Now, at least in the Old Testament, they do say that God is responsible for evil. At least they're honest. Now, and there's a problem with life after death that I think a lot of people are hung up on death. It's an interesting subject. But as you look at life after death, actually my wife was raised a Presbyterian. But she didn't know she was predestined until I came along. And I said, well, and that was never taught in her religion. But basically, we all are predestined. If there is an all-knowing, all-powerful being who has created us, he has created us the way he created us. And whatever we do, we're destined to be there. So I want to mention also a life after death, because I saw something in a book that I was reading about life after death, and it quoted Deuteronomy. And so I went to look it up. And Deuteronomy says very significantly, there is no life after death. Now, Jesus comes along, and he's a big life after deather. And Muhammad didn't do any better either, because they found that they could control people's actions better with fear than they could with love. And so if you want to say that God is love, I will say that God is fear. Because without fear, nobody's going to be going to church. I mean, now some of the mega churches that basically are teaching people how to live better every day, they may still survive. But the church that's got a God up there that's filled with fear, hellfire, and damnation is not going to survive. Now, what was the rest?
Well, it's basic. I think you've covered it. It was. Well, oh no, I'm sorry. You said your other chapter is the devil gets a bum rap.
Yeah, I think the devil gets a bum rap because he's just doing what God told him to do.
Absolutely.
God can stop him anytime he wants to, but for some reason he chooses not to. And then to blame mankind for what he has done, that's immoral and wrong. And another very terrible thing about religion, especially the Christian religion, is that you're not judged by your good deeds. Now, humanity needs to judge one another by how they act. I don't care whether you believe in one God, 10 gods, or 100 gods, or you believe that everything is God. I only care as how you treat your fellow man and how you treat your environment. And if we don't get back to that, then I'm very pessimistic. Okay.
You know, it's there seems to be a pattern with God, certainly in the Old Testament, that God basically punishes the innocent to teach the guilty a lesson. You know, it's like God is this Moe in some kind of cosmic Three Stooges movie. You know, he tries to hit Larry and he winds up hitting Curly. You know, it's one of those dumb things. Anyway, if anybody has any questions, yes, in the back.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong. The premise of God.com is that you're concocting a God more germane to our present day. Is that right?
Well, with tongue in cheek. Because I don't think we can concoct a God. But with tongue-in-cheek, I say, look, if we're going to have a God, let's get rid of the testosterone-driven masculine God and replace it, he, she, or it, whatever it is, with a feminine God. Yes?
Apart from the humorous angle, why bother?
Well, why bother? Just read the paper today. We have to bother. And look at what's happened in our country under the influence of a religious zealot.
Well, aren't you really saying that your first choice would be why bother at all?
Yeah.
But it's kind of, if you're going to, then at least invent a God that's an adult.
Yeah.
You know.
And moral. The God of the Jewish, Christian, Muslim God is immoral. Can you imagine anybody wiping out the whole world? Killing the whole world? Can you imagine anybody, any father, even a father, and they're bad, you know, even a father that allows his own, he sits on his ass and allows his own son to be tortured and killed and crucified and then say, ooh, look how kind I am. That to me is completely unbelievable, and I have trouble with people who say they believe that. I can't. Well, I know why they say. They're scared. And